It is cold season around the United States at the moment, both physically and health-wise. If you have any kids at school or anything else, I've just been hearing in droves, including my household, fevers are galore, coughs are galore, colds are galore, and it happened to be like 6 degrees or less most of this week here in Chicago. All this is to say, what is a healthy status for your therapy practice? We're diving into unhealthy versus healthy. Specifically, in this video, we're going to be talking about the 5 core signs of a healthy therapy practice. What are some just key benchmarks that are a clear sign that you're trending in the right direction, that your business is healthy, and that maybe you don't need to go inject some medication to survive the process a little bit. That being said, let's dive in.
Yeah, I think it's important. If you if you don't know what healthy looks like, you don't know what unhealthy looks like. It's hard for you to set boundaries for yourself. It's hard for you to kind of like figure out when you're back to normal. It's hard for you to figure out when you're off kilter a little. So the first metric that we have to look at when it comes to being healthy is if you have a consistent profit margin in your practice. And so most practices typically fall between maybe like the 15 to 25% profit margin range.
Yeah.
That's going to include costs like your payroll costs, so your staff, any additional staff, maybe your rent, vendors, maybe a mix of softwares, or a few other things that are maybe just chewing at your profits a little bit here and there. But for the most part, you should always come out on top. Private practice is a business model where you can always come out on top. If you're like, but Attilio, I pay my therapist before we get reimbursed. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that. So maybe we can think outside of the box on how we can always be profitable, because this is a business where you're just providing services and then you make money on top of those services. And so there's more complex situations where maybe you have like some W-2 situations where you may have to eat a little bit of cost before you make some money. But I would say for the most part,
Yeah.
most practices should always be above the board in the green. Maybe in times of growth, you move into like a yellow range of profits. But otherwise, you should always pretty much be in the green for your practice there.
Yeah, we've got some great content coming up on the 4 major profit levers in private practice. So stay tuned for that in our newsletter here in the YouTube channel. Within that, though, I would akin profit in a private practice a little bit like sleeping. Sleep is a critical benchmark to anyone's healthy lifestyle. Lots of people are surviving on 4, 6, 8, hours of sleep out there, but you really need 8+ hours of sleep clinically when they look at it. And you start to get into heavy high performance, people who do heavy training, heavy output in other places. Typically, you actually need more sleep than just that base 7.5 to 8.5 hours at night. So can your business survive for a season or a period with a little less sleep, or a little less sleep than you should have, a little less profit than you want? Yes. But if you want to have a robust lifestyle around freedom, around consistency for the business, all of these things, you need profit in order to make all that happen. And having a more profitable business is actually a lot less risky to the team members that are working for your business, for you, because you'll have the bandwidth to make hard decisions for growth or for retention or for other pieces. You just get to choose where your money goes a lot easier. So I just suggest don't live off of essentially the equivalent of 6 hours sleep every night and drink a bunch of cups of coffee, which is like low profit because you're overpaying your clinicians and like it feels good or whatever. Like you really have to root into the numbers and come up with a lifestyle that works and is healthy, is robust, and that will push some other decisions out of the way if you're prioritizing this correctly, which is why it's number one here.
Yeah. Track and monitor your sleep. If you want to be a performance, if you want to be a performance, like you want your business to be a performance athlete, right? You want it to run for you. You want
Yeah.
it to do great for you. Number two is maybe the opposite side of running here, and that's maybe you being the actual coach to your runner. And so if the practice owner is working on the practice, on the business elements, instead of working in the business, you know that this business has a higher likelihood of success. Now, there's
Yeah.
some cases where founders overtouch things. So that can happen when you're only working on the practice and maybe you're just like doing too much. That can definitely be the case. However, I would say probably for 100% of the private practices that we work with, that is not the case. So we typically find that most practice owners are still working very heavily in their business. Maybe they're still seeing high clinical sessions, or they're not doing enough business building activities. That means
Right.
like standardizing procedures, creating processes that are going to be helpful, and honestly, like learning and growing from your current state of the practice and how that maybe impacts your next trial runs that you're doing for your business. This also includes things like just anything that's really high leverage for your business that maybe no one else can get done. And so,
Yeah.
if no one else can do it, you have to be the one to do it. And so, oftentimes, it can be easy to kind of find ourselves in a position where we're avoiding things that we want or need to do. And if you spend less time avoiding the things, you're just going to pass through those problems and move on to the next problem.
Yeah. I'd say business owners of every single size. It doesn't matter whether you started your practice literally yesterday or you've been doing this for 5 years and you're doing multiple seven figures and things are going really well. This exists on a spectrum because I think that there's a little bit of you start growth activities that initially look like you're working on the business, you're building the business, you're doing new above and beyond activities. But then eventually the status quo changes a little bit. And what used to be a big giant growth activity a month ago or a year ago now sort of assimilates into like a daily necessity activity. So a year ago, you figuring out information and hiring a marketing vendor and building out a really robust marketing strategy that never existed before, that looked like working on your business, which was phenomenal. But a year later, that's still going, and you're still in the day to day, running half of it, sort of, blah blah blah. And now you're just in the daily rigor of it, and you haven't reset your calendar, you haven't reset your priorities to move out of it, systematize it, pass it off, finish hiring cycle, whatever it is, and move on to more growth activities. The other thing that often happens if you just audit your calendar, there are things based off of your business size that you just won't be able to afford to get off your plate yet, especially if you're growing at the speed of cash. That's okay. However, you have to have the discipline similar to profit to feed your future business, just like you feed your current business. And that's the bottom line is if you don't invest in the business you're trying to build with a measurable amount of time every week, your current business will self-perpetuate very, very easily.
Yeah, it's kind of like betting on yourself, right? Like you can bet on yourself that you're going to be there. You can bet on yourself that there's going to be a brighter, better future. You're going to bet on yourself and take that time. Um, and if you're not betting on yourself, no one else is.
Yeah.
So our
And
next
this,
point. Okay,
go ahead.
I was just going to bring us to our next point. So if you had something else, great.
Yep.
Our next point is just your recruiting is locked in. This is something that is a consistent activity that is happening in your practice, and you're able to easily do so. You've essentially built a great recruiting pipeline. So people is the lifeblood of your business, no matter how
Yeah.
you try to crack it. Otherwise, most of you guys are spending 50% of your total costs or more on your people, which means that people have to be at the forefront. And just like you need a market to get new clients, you need a market to get new talent. And
Yeah.
our recommendation always has been that you always have recruiting going. It's important for you to have a consistent pipeline to be able to tap into when you need it, because sometimes things change in the marketplace. Sometimes things happen where you're like, man, I need to hire 5 people all at once, or I need to only
Yeah.
hire this one really good key person, and it needs to be great. And it's better than talking to 6 people to hire the position. You need to talk to like 200 people to hire for the position. And so having more people to talk to during your recruiting process means that you get to be more selective, which means you get higher quality candidates and higher quality people.
All of these things that we're listing are, signs or fruits of a healthy practice. What that means is there's underlying things that you have to get right. Sleeping 8 hours a night doesn't necessarily automatically make you a healthy person, for instance, but it's one of the key components that if you get right amongst others, might allow you to have more capacity, right, to work out or more capacity to do other things. So this is why having easy or locked in clinical recruitment is a really obvious sign that you're probably doing a bunch of other things right. One, it probably is an indication that your clinical care and your culture with your clinicians is good or is healthy potentially because they're trying to pull in friends, or you've got this outward reputation that people are hearing about you on an industry level in your city or in your marketplace and saying, yeah, I want to work from you. Or you as a practice owner, as a leader, have a really great reputation in other circles that you've ran in. That's one version of it. Or as Attilio said, you're actually marketing, you're investing the dollars and the time for good pay packages, good descriptions on your job postings. You're doing this underlying work that makes it easy or seamless for you to always have the clinical talent or non-clinical talent that you need or want in your practice. But this also means that you're probably not fearful of your next hire, where your next hires are going to come from, and so those things. So that means there's probably some emotional regulation in the practice and a lot of other stuff. So it's just a very clear fruit of a bunch of good things going on. And you should ask yourself, man, if clinical recruitment is a 0 out of 10 for us right now, it's a huge, giant struggle. It's time to unpack some of those layers that are adding up to it being a struggle. But that kind of brings us to a number 4, which is just, do you have the capacity as a practice owner to take vacation time? Do you have the capacity as a practice owner to take vacation time? The morbid example would be, say, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, what would happen to the practice? Maybe if you're a solo practice, it truly does disappear. But as you venture into group practice land, suddenly your ability to go a week to 2 weeks to 4 weeks of like full turning off your phone, what's left over essentially at the end of it all? And I'd say it's a little bit of like a lark because that isn't happening fully in suspension for most business owners of any size. Often we like to stay attached to our business. We're on vacation. I'll check my email and check and do whatever. But if things don't run for a day or for a week, it's a really, really good sign that there's not a habit of delegation, of team building, of systematizing, and a lot of other things that need to be locked in and happening for ongoing practice maintenance.
Yeah, I'll maybe just add to the vacation time note, and this maybe grabs a little bit from easy clinical recruiting too. If you have a clear org chart, so for private practice, it's really easy to create an org chart for your business. There's only a few spots where you can make like a organization chart. And what you'll find is if you do a vacation test, don't do this self-destructively. Okay, don't be like, I'm going to see if my team can handle it. I would say maybe like take a day or two and don't reply and see what piles up, right? And then maybe take a week and see what piles up. And maybe 6 months down the line, take a 14-day period and see what piles up. What are the requests that are pending? What are the things that people couldn't answer? What are the things that those are all good indicators of things that you should probably create some kind of training around, probably create some kind of standard around, or make sure that someone owns it other than you. And so if they are coming to you, that means it's locked in your head, or they're trained just because of the repetition or how things have happened.
Yeah.
They're trained to go to you, the magic vending machine, which is a good segue into, I think, number 5, which is clarity on your number 1 bottleneck. Are you the number 1 bottleneck in your business? I think a healthy business has to know the number 1 priority for growth at any given time. There's always just one thing that's holding you back at any given time that is the biggest thing, right? And so if you don't know what your biggest thing is, maybe it is you, maybe you just did a vacation test and you're like, man, it is me actually. Maybe if you don't know what your biggest thing is, you have to find it out. I give a wicked good, I think it's wicked good, example about factories making cars. And there's a system to make cars where it takes 1 steering wheel, 4 wheels, and an engine to make a car. But your factory makes 6 steering wheels, 2 engines, and 20 tires a day. How many cars do you make? And what's the limiting part that's holding you back? Oh, maybe it's the engines. So if we need to make more cars, we need to maybe make more engines first, right? That's your number one bottleneck.
And if you've got two things that feel like they're an equal bottleneck, and you're like, oh man, both of these feel like they're just flat on their face, you start with the one that interacts with the earliest part of your business or practice. What do I mean by that? Okay, marketing generates leads that leads to your sales team doing intake. Okay. Maybe your intake team isn't doing that great, but also maybe you're getting like 2 leads a week or 2 leads a month, and that is just not anywhere close. Great. You spend all of your time and energy improving your intake process, and that's where your big business growth time goes. It doesn't fix your marketing problem. It doesn't change how many leads. So every ounce of time that you spend writing scripts and role playing with your team and trying to fix intake is helpful and is needed. However, after you do all of that across weeks or a month or something, you're still stuck with the same marketing problem that's earlier in your business. And so when you're trying to compare two big bottlenecks that feel equally in proportion of capacity and if issue, target the one that's earlier in your business. But then also just know that you have to understand that what are the options for bottlenecks? Because I think sometimes we zoom in and we say, oh, this big thing, we think it's a big thing, is the bottleneck in the business. And oh, it's my website branding. Well, is your website branding the bottleneck for your entire business? Or is, maybe you just don't feel good about that. So I think that's the other point to this is if you don't have clarity on your number one bottleneck, what are we focusing on? Where's your time going as a business owner? And are we thinking through it correctly?
Guys, hopefully these 5 distinct points help you at least track and measure where you're currently at, and maybe give you a good idea of, oh man, I thought I was healthy, but maybe I need to go look at these items as well. Am I tracking my sleep? Am I tracking my diet? Am I tracking my exercise? Am I tracking? We want a performance athlete.
Yeah.
I think we'll all be happy if your business is a performance athlete. So we want a performance athlete for your business, and hopefully this helps you get on that healthy path.
Bottom line is when we look at all the things that we could say, oh, is this going well or not well in your practice? Does your business make the money it should? Does your team do the work that they should without you being there? And do you have the capacity to grow your business where you want it to grow to, or take time off from your current business in the way that you need? And that's why this spread, that's the relationship between you, your team, and the money that the business makes. And if those are all flowing together and are really healthy, you've got a healthy business. We'll see you next time for the 5 signs of an unhealthy practice. See you guys soon. Cheers.